Welcome to the Darkstream. VoxDay, voxday.net, and unauthorized.tv. Thanks for tuning in. And as you can see, I'm sporting one of the new Dorking Wanderers Football Club caps that are available now at NDM Express. So this is the snazzy Owners Club cap, so it's definitely a limited edition, as it were. And you know how at Castalia we love limited editions. So you'll be happy to know, by the way, if you're a Castalia subscriber, that War and Peace arrived safely in the warehouse. About, I don't know, 1,600 or so. So Library is already sold out. Library, there's probably 70 some. So no, I'm not muted. Check your stuff. According to Wu-T Bear, audio and video are good. So anyhow, hang on, I got a note here to check. Yeah, definitely got material for tonight. So it's a big day today, very big day today. The title of this stream, as you may have seen if you got the notifications, I never know what carries through and what doesn't, but you know, the post-World War II era has now officially come to an end. There's just no way that the world is ever going to be the same. And Servant says, black hat, black shirt, are we going to war? Possibly, but not because of what I'm wearing. This is pretty much what I wear all the time. Yeah, because we do the, have the various t-shirts and stuff. I usually get sent the prototypes before we decide what to do. So I have quite a collection of t-shirts, some that I've literally never worn. So much so that Space Bunny is threatening to burn half my wardrobe. But anyhow, no, this is just, I just thought I'd show people. In fact, here's the regular caps. This is the basic one. What's cool about it is we got permission from the club, since we were a sponsor, to put Castalia Library on the back. It's on the back of all the caps. So this is the standard one. Got the rooster. And this is kind of the custom one that they came up to match the custom shirt that the guys designed. Also has the Castalia Library on the back. So if you're interested, they're at NDM Express. Just ndmexpress.com and look up Dorking Wanderers, and you'll find it there. In fact, I'll show you later in the show. I'll show you the site. What's interesting is that they liked the black and white design of the one t-shirt so much that they asked if they could do a variant of it for their book crowdfund that is going to launch in a week or two. So anyhow, back to the post-World War II era. So what's changed? One of the singers from One Direction died. That's not relevant. The leader of Hamas, or the leader of the military wing of Hamas, was reportedly killed by the IDF. I don't know that it's been confirmed by Hamas, but Benjamin Netanyahu himself said that now the war is going to start. They're in the final phase of the war on Gaza. Maybe even the war against Hezbollah as well. I'm personally skeptical, and here's why. The basic strategy of the post-World War II Western way of war has been regime change. And that's how the West has affected its hegemony and dominated most of the Western Hemisphere and quite a bit of Europe, and so by affecting regime change. That's why we kept seeing all this rhetoric about how Putin had just 2 more weeks, this, that, and the other thing. And the theory is that it's the head of the snake thing. If we cut off the head of the snake, then we win. The problem is that while that, what the heck, changed the battery. I thought I just put a brand new one in there. This may be a very short show tonight, folks. We'll have to see. Either that or we'll not be doing a lot of video. But, I actually didn't, I thought I charged it up. But anyhow, I'll let me pop over to the other screen here for a second, and then let's see what, actually I'm just going to turn this off for a second. So let me turn the camera off and change the battery. We'll see what's up. Be right back. Discuss amongst yourselves, as they say. What the heck? Oh, looks like we're in luck. Okay. There we go. I think we are good. Let's go ahead and turn it back on. Yes, a little bit off. Close. There we go. So, turns out I did charge up the other battery, so we're all good. I forgot. We went on really long Archaven nights last night. John C. Wright was on, and you know, John C. Wright is many things, but a man of few words he is not. So, and then John insisted on beating the whole Asmongold thing to death. So it went on for a while. Anyhow, head of the snake strategy. This is, it can be effective in some cases. You know, certainly the invasions of the Golden Horde stopped when Ogadai Khan died. But in general, you don't win a war by killing a general, a king, etc., etc. You know, when you're dealing with total war, industrial scale war of the sort that is being fought, in Israel, in Lebanon, in Gaza, in Ukraine, then you have to actually destroy the enemy's capacity to make war, or they have to agree to surrender more or less unconditionally. And there is no real infrastructure in Gaza. There is no real infrastructure in Lebanon. It's possible that the Israelis are right and that Hamas has nobody who can step up and lead their thousands of fighters um, into war anymore. I'm pretty dubious because it's not like they didn't know the situation going in. It's not like Washington, D.C., where the politicians can't possibly imagine being targeted. If you are a terrorist leader, you probably have a pretty good expectation that your life expectancy is not particularly long. The fact that both Yasser Arafat and Menachem Begin, two pretty hardcore terrorists, did end up dying as politicians, more or less in bed. So it's possible, but the point is that your life expectancy in that particular situation is always going to be fairly short, and presumably there are all kinds of succession plans that would rival the British throne's list of, how many people have to die before so-and-so becomes king. If the British monarchy knows who is 17th in line to the throne, one would tend to suspect that Hamas has some kind of succession plan in place, that Hezbollah has some kind of succession plan in place. Maybe they don't. Maybe Netanyahu is right. Maybe the only reason that Hamas was fighting was because this one guy was so absolutely crucial to the effort. If so, I'm wrong, and we'll all be pleased to see peace in the Middle East and lower oil prices. That would be great, obviously. I don't think it's very likely. But also, that's not what I'm talking about. When I say that the World War II, the post-World War II era is over, what I'm talking about is that as of now, as of literally some announcements today, the Pax Americana, the neoliberal world order, the U.S. hegemony over the finances of the world is essentially done. And the reason is pretty simple. The reason is this. And what this is it's a card for Brics Pay. And Brics Pay is specifically designed to address the SWIFT system of bank transactions. SWIFT right now is how most bank transactions take place. And of course, it's controlled by the US, by banks in the US. And because of the sanctions that were first enacted on Russia, or actually first on Iran, then on Russia, and then on China, as well as a few other countries here and there, sanctions that are being put on them as recently as today in Switzerland. Switzerland just adopted the EU's 14th round of sanctions against Russia. I mean, it was stupid of the EU. It's absolutely foolish of Switzerland to do it. It's not going to help them achieve any of their anti-Russian goals. What it might do is leave them out of the larger half of the global economy. So that's obviously undeniable or undesirable, you would think. But personally, for us, we're not locked out of your system. You're locked out of ours. Well, exactly. I mean, what do you think is going to happen when you lock the majority of the world's population, two of the world's major powers, out of your system? I mean, this is the danger of trying to exert excessive control. This is the danger of abusing your position. Is that people go, you know what? We're not allowed to play. We're not going to try to play. And so they don't. They just create their own system. And so with Brics Pay, if you're what's going to happen right now, it's mostly designed, I believe, the reports on it are very, very scanty. I was a little surprised when they called it Brics Pay and actually produced, that's like a debit card. I think that's a 500 ruble debit card or something that they're showing off. What's both significant and surprising about that is that it's obviously a consumer spending device. It's a consumer tool. All the stuff that we've been hearing about has been balance of trade stuff at the national level. But if they, and this might explain why it's been taking so long for them to put it together, because it's a lot more complicated and takes a lot longer to put together a consumer system. So if they've got a consumer system, then this is not only going to be an answer to SWIFT, but here's where it gets really interesting, at least for our community, is it becomes an answer to all of the payment processor games. Who cares if you get banned by PayPal when you can use Brics Pay? You know, right now, apparently Jordamon checked out the demo. The demo appears to have essentially been a gift card hooking into various Brics currencies. Right, so the point is that that is a consumer-focused tool, and presumably it's going to be a consumer tool that private corporations are going to have access to. And so what that means is nobody is ever going to be able to throw their weight around and deplatform anybody ever again. They can try, but once there's a solid alternative to both the Western payment processors, Visa and MasterCard, the various pieces that connect the payment processors to the credit cards and the banks and all that sort of thing. You know, this is going to be an incredibly effective way for the Eastern companies, the Brics companies, to take root in the Western economy. Now, some of the sanctions that the EU enacted actually seem to be aimed at something like this, although the language made it unclear as to whether the sanctions were to ban non-SWIFT transactions that were used for specific purposes related to the defense industries, but it could have been a ban on all non-SWIFT transactions. I don't think so. I think that's unlikely. I think that interpretation is unlikely, because that would mean that crypto and PayPal and all the various digital alternatives have been banned all across Europe, and it's certainly not being reported that way. It's certainly being reported as sanctions on Russia related to the Ukraine situation, which means it is probably the defense application of those transactions that they're referring to, that they're sanctioning. But the point is, even if they're trying to do that, they're not going to be able to do it very well, because China is much bigger. You know, the Chinese market is absolutely massive. That's why we're producing, we haven't revealed the name or anything yet, but we have partners in China. We're doing our first 2 leather-bound books for the Chinese market right now. In fact, if there's any interest, we're not planning to sell them in the West, but if there are some people who might like them for posterity's sake or something, especially like the first 1 or 2, we'll make sure to offer them for a limited period of time, just in case anyone wants to get their hands on a few. You know, I'll probably put them on my shelves myself, even though I can't read them at all. You know, China could probably force it to be legal by simply saying it's the system for trading with them. The West depends upon them for simple things. Well, and more than just simple things, they're going to be getting more and more into semiconductors and all that sort of thing. So, um, like vitamin C, um, that's a little frightening. But imagine being able to order from a non-converged sovereign world competitor as the corpocracy continues to metastasize and converge. Well, that's the idea. That's the advantage. And I can guarantee you that the Chinese and probably the Russians as well are very aware of this stuff. I mean, they've read my book. They've read Ian Fletcher's book. They've read Steve Keen. They love Steve Keen. That's the interesting thing, is a lot of the unauthorized intellectual outlaws that the Western media either refuses to cover or mentions only in order to discredit, deplatform, etc. Many of those people are actually quite respected in China. I mean, there's a reason why I was offered, the opportunity to be a regular guest or possibly have a show on what do they call it? CGNT used to be called. It's basically the Chinese state English television network. I was on it twice. I was on one of their shows twice a couple years ago, and it went quite well because I was talking about economics, and the things that I talked about came to pass, which obviously made a bit of an impression. So if they're paying attention to relatively minor figures like us, they're paying attention to the larger issues, the bigger brains, the more significant, serious publications, and they've got very, very smart people paying attention to these things and looking for solutions. They understand the opportunity. I know they understand the opportunity with regards to the convergence at the payment processors and that sort of thing. Alipay already has something like 5,000 locations across the United States. I think there's another 2,000 across Europe. Right now, they're only utilized for Chinese tourists. But it won't take much to open it up to Westerners, especially because they already know how to deal with Westerners, since they have an Alipay setup for Western tourists to China. So the mechanisms are already more or less in place. And now that they've reached the point where they're actually demoing a functional multi-currency debit card, it can't be long before they start offering online solutions. And so this is something to pay attention to, and this is something that all of the community should probably be thinking about, the possibility of opening up an account with them, or one of the variants of it, because there will be many variants of it, I'm sure, once it becomes available in your area, which it should in a reasonable period of time. So this shatters the financial hegemony that the banks based in the US have had over the global consumer financial markets. It's going to be interesting to see if there's an attempt to actually ban these cards and stuff, which I don't know they're going to want to do, because of course that will immediately turn into a ban of the Western systems throughout the majority of the world. I mean, the extent to which the economic and geopolitical strategists screwed up on this decision to sanction Russia and subsequently China is absolutely massive. I mean, it's on a generational level scale. It's the kind of thing that historians are going to point to and say, wow, that was amazingly dumb. And here's another thing that came out today. I thought it was an interesting point. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said Iran is only 2 weeks away from having an atomic bomb. And he said that on July 19th, 2024. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but 2 weeks from July 19th, 2024 is early August. And early August was 2 months ago. Now, obviously, we've been hearing that Iran is just 2 months or 2 weeks or however long away from having an atomic bomb, nuclear weapons, etc., etc. The neocons have been saying this since about 2001. Was it? Yeah, around that time. And so the difference here, though, is that on October 5th, there was a very large earthquake reported deep underground in Iran, only it didn't have all the characteristics of an earthquake. I'm not an expert on this stuff. I don't pretend to be able to read these things, to read the seismographs and so forth, but it was pointed out that there are fundamentally three aspects that are normally there when it's a earthquake, and two of them were missing. And the seismograph was actually consistent with the explosion of a nuclear weapon. And Israel refused to, or did not, they didn't refuse, despite threatening repeatedly to respond to the second series of missile strikes against Israel. Israel elected not to respond, despite saying they would, despite repeatedly threatening to launch massive attacks. Now, the Biden administration has been credited with somehow talking them out of it, but let's face it, Joe Biden is in no shape to talk anyone out of anything. And nobody listens to Blinken. There's a funny video of Xi Jinping just treating the news of his arrival with complete disrespect. No respect whatsoever. And so it's very unlikely that the U.S. was able to talk them out of it, especially when they haven't been able to talk them out of, bombing Lebanon and bombing Beirut and all that sort of thing. Sam says, the Samson option seems kind of like a bluff in that light. Well, I believe it is. I mean, even if they do happen to have suitcase nukes planted in the capitals of Europe and so forth, very, very few people are very likely to be deeply concerned about that, mostly because most of the people of the West absolutely hate their governments. Their governments are not legitimate. Their governments are not fairly elected. Their governments are playing all sorts of shenanigans, constitutional, extra-constitutional, in order to prevent the will of the people from being enacted. Nobody in Europe wanted war. Maybe the Finns. The Finns might have wanted NATO to join in the war against Ukraine. Pretty much no one else did. And yet, billions and billions were being sent there. And this is the third point that just happened, the third element that just happened today, And that is France coming out and saying, you know what, we're not going to deliver the 3 billion to Ukraine that we said we would. I think they're still planning on giving them $1 billion, or maybe they already did. But the point is that Europe has officially thrown in the towel. They haven't. Let me rephrase that. Europe has effectively thrown in the towel. They haven't done it officially yet, but they absolutely have done it. Germany's already said we're not sending any more heavy weapons, and they're reducing the amount of money. France is reducing the amount of money, and the U.S. has also been reducing the amount of money it's supplying, which means that it's not going to. You know, Russia has taken more ground in the last month and a half, or actually, I think no, they've taken more ground in the last 2 months than they had in the previous 18. And what that means is that they're through the main defenses. They're through the fortifications. And on Hal Turner's site, which obviously is unreliable, but in this case, what he's saying actually makes sense with some things that other people are saying. He's saying that 100,000 Russian troops are being positioned in order to engage in one of those massive offensive, those Operation Bagration, giant defenses or giant offensives that the Russians enacted in the latter half of World War II. Obviously, they've been avoiding those tactics because of the way that war has changed, because of the advances in the technology of war. But now that the Ukrainian defenses are crumbling, now that most of their veterans are gone, they're having to literally drag people out of their homes, out of the nightclubs, out of the stores, in order to just put people in uniform. But those people are not going, that sort of forced conscript is not going to fight effectively. They're already seeing, we know that the Russians are taking lots of prisoners. They generally treat them pretty well. In fact, I don't think it's a mistake that that they came out with this report claiming that the Russians had executed 7 prisoners or something that they'd taken. Apparently they were drone operators or something. And now it's possible that that there were some prisoners mistreated. That does happen. But in general, the Russians have been treating their prisoners very, very well, as the prisoners who've been returned to Ukraine in prisoner swaps have reported, because the better you treat your prisoners, the more likely people are to surrender rather than fight to the death. It's a very smart thing to treat your prisoners very, very well if you want to save your own soldiers. And the Russians do not do that whole human wave thing that they used to do back in World War II. Their tactical capabilities have significantly improved in the last 70 years. If Ukraine had a soldier for every time someone claimed Russia was going to use a human wave. Yeah, but see, I don't think that what Hal Turner is talking about there has anything to do with the human wave. What I think it has to do with is a massive multi-front mechanized operation that is meant to bypass defenses, create ginormous cauldrons, and then force the surrender of all the soldiers in those cauldrons. If you look at the maps of World War II, you can see these huge operations, and some of the more gripping German military accounts of the war are actually written by German soldiers who were desperately trying to get out of the encirclement before it was closed. So the Germans would fight to keep these corridors open and get as many of their troops out as they could. Obviously, that didn't work for General Paulus and the Sixth Army, which was encircled and captured in its entirety. Because once you've got an army encircled, they can't get supplied. They essentially can't fight, and so that's what the goal. That's what the goal was from the start, but it didn't work because Ukraine had 10 years to build fortifications. The reason that they're gaining so much ground now is that the Ukrainians are defending land that they didn't really expect to have to defend because they've already been pushed back out of the areas that have been fortified. And so, and also the corruption, and apparently the corruption in Ukraine hasn't helped because some of the money that was supposed to have gone for concrete and pillboxes and digging trenches and all that has been banked, has been lost to a certain amount of corruption. Victoria Nuland should have demanded that Gonzalo Lira get deported to the U.S. I shall pee on her grave in the future. Yeah, that was absolutely unconscionable. I mean, he was also, I believe, a citizen of Ecuador, but he was a citizen of the United States. And the State Department made no attempt to help him out or get him back. And so, that's just unconscionable. But the people who are in the U.S. State Department are not Americans. They don't care about Americans. They don't actually care about U.S. citizens. It's just a means to an end for them. And fortunately, we will probably all live long enough to see that end. And hopefully, it'll be all for the better. It may not be, but we have to hope. Not being governed by global Satanists would be a great thing, as far as I'm concerned. That doesn't mean that Putin and Medvedev and whoever else will be running Russia over the next 10 to 20 years are good guys. It doesn't mean that the General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party is a good guy. But at least they're not global Satanists. And so that's why I think there's reason to be optimistic. I think that this end of this post-World War II period, which has been so disappointing and so damaging to Americans, and has just been awful for most of the countries of the world. I think it's a very good thing that that they've finally overreached, and it's finally coming to an end. Now, this is not at all the way that I thought it would end. I was pretty certain that it was going to have something more to do with China or Iran, maybe even Pakistan or India. I thought it was going to involve the very spectacular loss of several aircraft carriers, because aircraft carriers have been the symbol of American power for the last 70 years. But missile technology is such now that air power is pretty much done. Air power was never quite able to do what Duhat, the Italian aviator who was the original inspiration behind the whole concept of winning industrial war with airplanes, with air power. it never really quite worked out the way it was supposed to. You know, but it was still effective. And now, first with the S400 and S500 systems, then next with the laser systems that are coming. It's just going to be very, very difficult to utilize air power. I mean, Top Gun, the sequel, Top Gun 2, clearly envisioned that the age of the pilot was all but over. Top Gun 2 is probably the last hurrah of the jet pilot hero. Good to see it go out with a bang, as it were, but there's just not much more room for that. We're at a very, very significant inflection point in history in terms of how war is waged. It's kind of too bad that Martin van Creveld hasn't been writing much on it, because he's the one who talks about the technology of war, the transformation of war. The Technology of War is one of the best books I've ever read on war, but it needs an addendum. It needs an updating on the basis of what we've seen with regards to air defenses and what we're seeing in terms of drone warfare on the ground. I think it's going to be very interesting to find out, if we find out, what's actually happening in southern Lebanon. I strongly suspect that the IDF is learning that ground warfare has changed. We saw it change even before the Ukrainian war. We actually saw it change in the Azerbaijani-Armenian war, which is the first war where drones were being used as effectively mobile, man-powered grenade launchers. That's what's changed everything, is that now, being out of sight, being in a trench, the kind of stuff that has protected ground soldiers from ranged attack for centuries doesn't work anymore. I mean, think about how much that changes. How do you move it all in the open when the enemy has the ability to strike from miles away? Obviously there's going to be measures and countermeasures, and sooner or later all the soldiers will have lasers, just like the stormtroopers in Star Wars. It was kind of funny. I was always wondering why lasers were so much better than projectile weapons. Other than they're cool, right? But the funny thing is, that's the one area where it becomes an absolute must. You would need to have something as fast and as devastating as a laser in order to take down drones. So I have no doubt that both the Russian and the Ukrainian soldiers are already equipped with shotguns or some other tools to help them shoot down drones that come at them. If they don't have them yet, you can guarantee that all the militaries are working on them. West by Godbear says, perhaps the Navy learned their lesson from the Yemenis. Still time for carriers to sink. Well, yeah, it's still possible. It's still absolutely possible, because the carriers are still there in the Middle East. At least 3 of them are, and they're actively involved in trying to intercept Iranian missiles. Swish Trash Panda says, I'm actually kind of surprised that Israel hasn't started using lasers yet for their domestic defense. I don't think that they have the the technological capacity to do that. You know, Israel's got some talented technology development, but it tends to be on the periphery. You know, it tends to be improving upon the U.S. stuff that they're buying, and or else it tends to be producing cheaper versions of it that they can sell elsewhere. You know, they're not. There's very little that the IDF is doing that is particularly cutting edge. You know, as Moshe Dayan said, the secret to their success and their reputation is fighting Arabs. And so, you know, we've seen more technological development come out of Ukraine and come out of Russia than we've seen in the last 20 years. And so, you know, because both Russia and Ukraine have those kind of capacities. All right, well, that's obviously all for tonight. So thanks for tuning in. I will make sure to I will make sure to yeah, we're off, I guess. So but I'll make sure to have my batteries charged up for the next one. We'll see you at the next Darkstream. I'm Vox Day, and this is the Darkstream.